Okay, hold on. No laughing because then I'll get the laughs.
Okay.
And I'm in a serious mode right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just chisel it.
Chisel it out for me. Come on. Come on, Haskell. Feed me. Give me those adjectives. No, that ain't it. Not close. Come on, we're getting there. We're getting there. Chisel it out for me. That's got to be an episode. All right. Well, welcome back to the Flagship Visuals podcast. We made it. Episode number 2.
And we're back.
Episode number 1, we sort of talked about our backstories, sort of how we fell into filmmaking and, sort of what brought us to, Flagship Visuals, you starting the company, me joining up with you, and really just highlighted at the end of the day, take, the production aspect out of it and our industry out of it. Like, what does Flagship Visuals bleed if you take those components out? Who are we? What's our core DNA? What makes us tick? And so if you haven't checked out that episode, that'll sort of give you context, going into this episode. But today's episode, we really want to just talk about, those beginning days of Flagship and, as sort of those milestone moments, be it through, experiences, projects, circumstances, obviously COVID being a huge, world global event that, changed some things for us and, sort of where we're up to today. So hopefully we get through all of that today. But why don't we just sort of kick things off by talking about year 1 of Flagship and what that sort of looked like, Matt. Yeah. Obviously, I wasn't around for year 1. So talk to me about year 1.
Year 1 was a lot of figuring things out on the business side of things, and learning how to run a business, learning what an invoice was, and understanding those things. And then, kind of off to the races after that. But I think year 1 was essentially me freelancing and then going full time in about June. And then that whole summer, a lot of travel projects, a lot of pretty fun projects back to back to back, Niagara Falls, Cooperstown, where baseball was like invented, and a lot of really cool Houston and shooting a lot of essentially like product end user testimonial type videos. And so those were the bulk of our beginning projects, and I utilized a good friend of ours who I'm sure we'll have on the podcast at some point, named Austin Burnett, who at that time had gone through film school and kind of was he was kind of starting as well, and so he was more on the freelance side of stuff, and so he came along on those trips and very much helped me out on that. And then Cody, who was in high school working for me part time, went on a lot of those initial trips. Like as soon as summer let out, I was like, and let's go, hop on this plane and let's roll. And so it was a 3-man band type projects and just kind of very run and gun. That first year was a lot of those types of projects.
So year 1 was just basically figuring it out, right?
Figuring it out.
And saying yes to pretty much anything that came your way.
Yeah.
And,
and also kind of being oddly like kind of surprised because I had zero gauge on like my skill set outside of the nonprofit world, which is very insulated and insular. It feels like a very big world, but it's a very small world.
Yeah.
And so then when you step outside of that, you don't really know like how good or how bad you are. And fortunately, it turned out that I was pretty decent in the eyes of, a pretty large brand and what they were used to. And so I didn't know it, but the things that we were shooting was kind of pushing the envelope even for them as a brand. And so that was like very eye-opening to me. And so
did you have all of those projects like booked for that summer before you went full time, or did you like
No.
leap of faith it and then just
No, like my first freelance project, I did it. It was in their terms a very, low budget. Hey, we don't have much of a budget. To me, I'm like, coming from the nonprofit world, I was like, wow, this is like a very, very good paying job, and so they loved it, fortunately. And then it was like, well, why don't we just have him do these other ones? And so then that one just led to the next one, to the next one. And so before I knew it, it was just kind of like, one project after the next just kept coming along. And so Yeah, and then again, you're trying to fulfill those particular projects, go on the production, get prepared for the production, have the right gear, edit, deliver, revisions, while still trying to get new clients and more clients. But this client has a lot more work that they want you to do, and so it was definitely like running full sprint with like your shoes on fire, and so it was fun, man. A lot of fun that first year, and a lot of figuring it out, and having and I think by the end of that year I had brought on another part-time high school guy named Caleb, and he was also editing because we had picked up another client who had very consistent work, and so we're doing a lot of car commercial type content, and a lot of the editing side of things and the production side of stuff too. So
looking back, I can sort of see that sort of set our trajectory, because, we always talk about, I'm sure we could look at the books and see like percentage wise agencies, percentage wise brands, but it's like you had a working consistent relationship with a brand at the end of that year, and a working consistent relationship with an agency. At the end of that year. And that sort of set the precedent of even the two different mindsets of working with a brand and working with an agency, which we can kind of touch on later. But at the end of the year, you basically had two solid clients that were continuing to give you repeat business, and some little things here and there as always. But is there any insight there that you would give to someone? That's a question that I feel like I get asked a lot by people who are interested in getting in the industry, is oftentimes like, how or where do I start? And there's a difference too between, joining an established company versus starting your own company. But is there any insight into that first year?
I would say on the financial side of things, just don't overextend yourself. To me, I never bought any piece of gear or any type of anything for the business unless it was like cash, like I had the money to do so. And then the first thing was I got an accountant to make sure my taxes were set up. I just heard too many, horror stories of, people unknowingly just kind of, starting a business and not realizing, that the tax side of stuff, and before they knew it, they unknowingly just owed a lot of money, and it kind of, stifled what they could have done, moving forward. And so for me, that was just kind of like the financial side of things was like, I don't want to be stressed financially at all. So I'm not going to go and take a business loan out. I'm not going to go and that was what I did for probably, I don't know, man. Like I think the first time Flagship ever took on any debt was our production van, and we could have, bought it cash, but instead we decided, no, like based off of our accountant's advice, like, no, like make payments on it. You'll be able to depreciate it, so on and so forth. But it took a lot. So, to get me there. But that would be like a big year one, like don't overextend yourself. Like there's no reason to go out and buy a ton of gear, because I can guarantee you by the time you've bought it, there's going to be more gear that comes out that the manufacturer comes out with, a new camera, new lenses, whatever. So there's no reason to do that. I would say build your network, and it's a lot about who you know, if you're cool to work with, and you're willing to learn, and you can do good work, or at least you're willing to do better work and improve on yourself. Like building your network and just finding where you can be valuable is where I would suggest you kind of put all of your effort, time, and energy is in that side of things for your first year in, whether it's freelancing or, starting a production company. So,
yeah. And then, so we'll call it year two, you hire, your first real full-time person. And even at that point, it was more of a internship, and we'll see what it looks like after this 3-month period, which did end up turning into a full-time position. And then simultaneously, that's when you and I were starting conversations. And when, I joined up with you too. And so that was sort of the fall of 2015. At that point, you had an established relationship with Steel, the chainsaw manufacturer brand. As well as, a handful of other clients, again, that were sort of divvying out consistent work. And you, on the nimble side, I feel like knew like, okay, we know how to, stretch these budgets and still have like a nimble crew, nimble execution, but we're starting to, I don't want to say hit the ceiling, but reach the limits of what can be done from a nimble standpoint with, what we were continuing to elevate. Like I said in the last episode, whatever that bar that we reached, that's now the floor. And we're continuing to elevate from that standpoint. And then when I came in, I had, again, not necessarily a ton of experience, but more experience with larger productions and just, a different outlook on things, being in the corporate world and seeing money from that standpoint as well, and what goes into, projects and so forth. And so I would say the next sort of milestone was we were doing the work that was sort of expected of us, and we were given an opportunity, given a project by Steel, to produce, at that time, was an internal video on their factory. And for those that don't know who Steel is or what they are, they're a global brand that's been around over 50 years and founded in Germany, and manufactured the first electric hand chainsaw, and they're huge in the commercial landscaping and construction industry, and tree industry here.
I think they came to the U.S. like in the 70s. So I think they're 40 or 50. They're 50 years
here.
But like they've been around for a long
almost
time.
100 years globally. And anyways, their headquarters is here in Virginia Beach, where we're located. And well over thousands of employees here globally, tens of thousands of people. And so it's a large brand. It's a $1 billion brand. And I'm saying all that just to give context to the stakes of, where you had been up to experience wise, where Flagship had been up to experience wise. And the project task that we were given was to create an internal video for their factory, because their factory was headquartered here. And just to give an updated factory video, sort of how it's made.
How it's made.
Yeah. Like the Discovery Channel show. And so showing, it's just sort of the process. And so I think, from that standpoint and, just from that trailblazing mindset and us knowing we can take, a budget and maximize it and stretch it. And, we just sort of swung for the fences on it and internally decided like, hey, we're going to check the boxes of their factory video, but I think that we can make a brand film out of this. And we spent every dime of that budget on, production value, hiring crew, really made it into a commercial production and created a brand film. And I mean, it was months in the works of pre-production, talks, concept, everything. And we were holding things close to the vest too, because we also didn't want to, them to get the wrong idea. We knew we could execute at the level and, bring it back to whatever they wanted. We were always making sure it was within their scope. And we were making sure too that like what we were putting in was sweat equity, and then, just not taking profit on, what would have been rightfully ours in that standpoint, and put it all back into the production to really elevate it. And I remember sleepless nights editing it. It ended up being like a over 10-day production and was not a 10-day production budget.
No.
And we just created all these scenarios and tied this, storyline together to all their end users and employees and all this stuff, like created this narrative of like what the Steel brand embodies, which became known as the Steel Way, was what the spot ended up being called. And I just remember, and this is like another little side note too, like we knew, hey, we can't just send a link to the client, like, and have them view it. Like we got like a projector and like met them, in their boardroom, got there an hour early, to show them the cut that we had been working on. We had custom music, a voiceover, which they had never done, like just a lot that went into it. And again, this is back in 2016, early 2016, where I'm not saying that brand films weren't around, but now you can go to pretty much any, 8-figure, 9-figure company they're going to have a brand film, right? This was still before that was like a normal known thing. And I remember just like playing it, and you're nervous and you're like wanting to make sure the sound's right and all that stuff. And, they're seeing it essentially first cut for the first time. We'd been living with it in post for, a month at this point. And I just remember the guy at the time, he's an awesome guy. He's since retired. But he was just like laid back in his chair.
After it got done?
After it got done.
So it stopped and it was like silence?
And he was just like this, and he was looking at the projector screen, and he's not saying a word
like,
at this point.
Gosh.
And I'm like, it's gonna get killed. And he just goes and looks at us and he goes, very good, very good. And I was just like, oh, okay. You just gotta breathe a sigh of relief. It's like almost like more was said and what was unsaid of like, we just caught him off guard in a good way, delivered over and beyond. And
pretty sure he immediately went and got the head of marketing to bring him down there and show it to him like unplanned.
Yes.
And,
you got to see this sort of thing.
And then head of marketing was like very, very blown away and taken back by that as well. So that was like I feel like the first project where it was like, all right, feather in a cap. Like I feel like I'm glad that we pushed the envelope. We knew we could, like I said, we knew we could always go back and deliver what they wanted, a tried and true, factory tour video. Like no problem, no problem at all. But we also knew like this is something that they need. We wanted to help elevate their brand. We knew that they needed this, and they maybe didn't know that they wanted that or needed that until they saw it. And sometimes like, I don't know if that's saying like, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness was kind of like, in this situation, it's like, that's what it is. Like, we're not asking for permission necessarily. We're like, we're going to show it to you. And like, hey, if we weren't supposed to do this, like, I'm sorry, we'll go back and we'll go back to the drawing board and give you exactly what you want. Not a big deal at all. And so fortunately it worked out and
and then some because it ultimately ended up turning into a national commercial where we did cut downs. We did a 60-second, a 30-second. Again, the brand film was 4 minutes long. And so, and
30 ended up airing on ESPN.
Yep.
During the Timber Sports and a lot of other stuff. Steel Timber Sports, they basically invented a sport to some extent, or at least made it very mainstream. And so I think it was the second longest running show on ESPN, or is the second longest running show next to like a fishing show. But it was like early days ESPN, and so it aired, on ESPN, on a lot of ABC Sports, all kinds of stuff that was airing it. And so again, I think that was our first national commercial as well.
Yeah. And on paper, right, we technically had no business doing that, but we knew we could execute. We knew that we could make something that was great. We knew something that we could make that matched the brand and elevated the brand. And I think that was sort of, like you said, our feather in a cap of like, we can do this. Like, we can make stuff and make stuff great. And I would say we sort of kept that spirit. And again, as we sort of grew and got more and more opportunities, we were doing, more local commercials and things like that. But every single time we iterated and, did things better, did things, maybe slightly different or improved in, different ways. And then I would say, we got to a point, maybe, I don't know, 3 years in. And again, I felt like we were sort of like, I don't want to say rinse and repeat, but a lot of the opportunities that were coming our way, like, I don't feel like I found my voice yet on some of those things. Like, I still feel like I was a little bit like, not skittish, but like doubtful or like, agreeable, or I don't know what word you would put to it. But actually, why don't we talk about like sort of like that defining moment of that split? Because oddly enough, like, we both DP directed that Steelway spot, which I don't DP anything, but I like came up, DP'd some of it. And same with you. And I know it wasn't on that shoot that we like made that distinction of like,
but it was, I feel like it was like not verbally, but I think naturally, organically midway through that Steelway shoot.
It wasn't that shoot though. It was a different shoot. It was, I remember it was, the pressure washer shoot.
Okay.
That's where it was like, it like switched where it was like, okay, you're DPing, I'm directing.
Yeah.
And it was like by the end of that shoot, we were like, oh, that felt so much better.
Yeah.
Because it was always like it was like we're a director DP duo.
Well,
right?
that's because that's our background. Our background is like run and gun. We're everything. We're every single hat. And you're working with total volunteers, like we talked about in the last episode. And you're the guy. You're holding the camera. You're directing people. You're lighting it. You're making sure the sound is good. You're everything. So,
so I think milestone 1 was just surviving the first year, probably for you, and then milestone 2 was being able to provide for both of our families, and then milestone 3 was like that Steelway thing, and then the next sort of frontier was making that switch of that like distinct roles. Right, we're not doing all things to all people anymore, even to each other, like wearing 17 different hats. We're going to draw the line. Derek, you're directing everything. Matt, you're DPing everything. And, that distinction happened. And then I would say our next one, we had a job where it was I would say a usual to decent budget for us, but something where it would have been very easy to play it safe. And the one I'm talking about is the job for the medical client. And I don't know if you remember this distinct conversation I had. I think we were the reason why I think I got boldness. Boldness was the word I was looking for. I hadn't found my voice, hadn't found my boldness yet to be able to say like, look, I know what I'm talking about, and I know that this will make it great. Like, on that job in particular, we had just enough going on to where we could say no to it. And it was with an agency that we hadn't worked with. And I just remember approaching it. I remember telling you like, look, dude, we got a lot on our plate right now. I'm only going to take this job on if they trust us, full stop. Like you hire, because you can get stuck and pigeonholed into getting hired, but then it's kind of like a little bit of
the camera there.
Yes.
Get them to say that.
Yes. And you're just sort of aiming and pointing and shooting, and your work is sort of judged through the lens and the filter of whoever's really calling the shots. And again, we're very collaborative, so it's not that we don't welcome input, but if you are hiring us, again, at this point now where we've matured, is like you're hiring us because you want us, you want Flagship's thumbprint on your project, and so there does need to be a mutual trust and respect.
Yeah, and you just want to be able to like breathe easy knowing we're going to take care of, all the random stuff and crazy decisions that don't need to be had. I mean, I know I would want to hire us. I'm very biased, obviously, but I'm like, dude, if I was going to drop some coin on like a serious video, like I would want to hire us to do it because I just know I wouldn't have to worry about a whole lot, Yeah. And so I think at that time, like you said, boldness was probably like the key word where, maybe I don't think we were yes men, but I think we were certainly like very kind.
We were very agreeable, like, and very much like, even if someone suggested something that we knew either wasn't going to work or was going to throw a wrench in things or wasn't the best use of time, again, we just couldn't make anything work. And so we would just say like, okay, yeah, we'll make that work. We'll make that work, rather than at the very least saying, this is why we don't think it'll work. This is why we think you should do this instead, or
like, hey, how about a minor tweak to that idea? And I think it'll work.
Yeah. So we hadn't found that voice. And so we were busy enough to where this job came through with a decent budget where I knew we could make it great if we had the say. And that's what happened. I remember even going through on that scout, and I remember having that conversation with you, and, me saying, we'll do the job, but this is how we're going to do it. And we are going to be in the driver's seat, and we're not going to be a passenger
in a good way.
In a good way. Yeah, for sure. I remember walking through that scout, and I remember even having a comment. You might not even remember this, but I remember telling them, because you had told me, you're like, it's just going to look so much better if, like, I know we're going to have this sterile environment. Again, it's medical. I know we're going to have this sterile environment. I know that things aren't going to be like real, and they might have an issue with that. And, we get Hollywood some things a bit. I'm like, all right, we're telling them this is what we're doing, like, to make it better. And we're just approaching it like, hey, we do this. We always do this. And I was like, We're not asking. We're saying this room needs to look like this.
We're
We
shutting
need to
off
shoot
all the
this.
lights.
Yeah.
We're putting a colorful light behind this machine.
And what was funny is, and again, we never in a rude way, never in a know-it-all way.
Yeah, sure.
And in a way that's like, hey, like you can rest easy that we know what we're doing. And again, on that location scout, we, said, this is how we need to do everything. The producer was awesome and was like, cool, like check. We'll go down. We'll make sure we ask that.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we do this. We'll make sure we have this for you. And it was almost like, even to them comforting, like, okay, cool. These people know what they're doing. I can just like make it happen.
Yeah.
I don't have to think about how to make this happen. They're just telling me what to do. And then, fast forward to on set and, maybe even some of those things that might have been questionable, but okay, we'll let you do it. Being on set that first day, and it was a 3-day shoot, and then by the second and third day, like client wasn't even near monitor. They were in the break room.
Yeah.
Like they were checking in maybe every few hours.
We were just doing our thing.
We were just doing our thing because of how they saw what things were looking like. They saw, the end product and the end result, just even in camera.
That trust was there right out the gate. Like it happened pretty quick, trust wise.
Yeah, and the end product was great. They loved it, and again, that was confirmation for me of like, okay, Derek, like you know what you're doing at this point. And if you don't, like you're going to be honest about that. And you're going to figure it out. And there's been productions that we brought people in that have elevated it and, might have been out of our wheelhouse and so forth, that we have done that with. But that was a big milestone for me as a director, finding my voice, having that boldness, knowing like, no, like you've hired me for a reason. And this is the reason.
That was a big one for me as a DP as well. Like
Yeah.
I remember like turning a corner, feeling a lot more confident on like, again, going back to like one-man band stuff. I'm not telling anyone necessarily what to do. Like lighting guys and G&E guys, like on that particular set, still pretty small crew, but I felt a lot more comfortable to kind of direct what we needed to do, walking into a room, knowing what angles were going to look best, what lights need to get shut off, where we needed to kind of place lights that would be hidden, but still doing what we want them to do, et cetera, et cetera. And I definitely felt like I had turned a corner on that particular shoot as well. So yeah, it was a fun shoot.
Yeah. That was year 3, end of year 3, I think, where we did that. And again, even from the gear side, we had sort of elevated somewhere around that year. We had, purchased our first Red camera. We, had our production van at that point. We were really like building out to be like, okay, we're a legitimate commercial production company at this point. And, we had brought Sam on as our producer. So it wasn't me and you sort of sharing that component, but he was helping with, producing and account managing. And we were sort of, full steam ahead, and the trajectory just kept growing. We continued to add to our team, and, we're given, again, continued opportunities. We could keep pointing at projects. Project, this happened. This project, that happened. I think another big one for us was another, established brand that we did a commercial for, through a partner agency, who we still work through today, have a great relationship with, Alice Blue. We had the opportunity to do a Capital One commercial. And again, just kept growing in that area of commercial filmmaking. Like we're getting outside of local, commercials and things like that, and working with, different agencies, spreading that, working direct with different brands. We're having a lot of experience on the brand film side of things. And so, that we're sort of going full steam ahead, sort of end of 2019, and then beginning of 2020 happens.
Yep.
And that sort of changed
a lot,
everything.
Yeah.
And so, anything up to that precursor of 2020 being that like distinct, marker, cause you're like right around that 5-year mark, 6-year mark. Anything else that sort of, just grew from a perspective standpoint, team standpoint, mentality, skill set, like anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, business organizational things, like how we were going to be building strategically, like who's playing what role, et cetera, right people, right seat. I think we had, really started to look at the business and how we were structured as a company a lot more seriously, and kind of work backwards from that, really legitimize a lot of that, run our meetings, our internal meetings a lot differently, our processes, how we were kind of putting things together, like all of it, our marketing plant side of things, a lot of that stuff was like really like on the upswing, and we were really starting to kind of getting all that stuff kind of in order, from what was basically started, year one up until that point. It was, again, like you said, very, very ready, fire, aim, and we're figuring it out as we go. And so, yeah, I think that was probably, some of those latter years was kind of like, organizing, I guess would be the key word, organizing a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to do some episodes where we highlight some of those projects, because so many come to my mind.
Yeah.
Again, those are milestones for a specific reason, but there's just so many projects and experiences that come to mind along the way of that just were really enjoyable for one reason or another, whether we pushed the creative boundary, whether we made new friends with, an awesome, partner and client, and, what that turned into and does turn into, to just figuring stuff out, trying new things. But yeah, I would say sort of going like a year and a half on that, like really like establishing ourselves as a company and figuring that out. And then that sort of bringing us to the beginning of 2020. And I would even say prior to COVID, and us sort of just like zooming out. And I think at that point we had a lot of success. We'd made it past that 5-year mark as a business. We had worked with a lot of the agencies in the area, have had a lot of opportunities with, even national brands at this point. And, for all intents and purposes, we're sort of heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like, I don't want to say we lost our way, but that main motto of enjoying the adventure was definitely not like functionally there anymore.
Sure.
And this was even prior to COVID. This was beginning 2020, but it's like
we could feel a little bit.
We could feel it, and we're like, okay, like maybe we like sort of like, I think at our largest we were like 8 people, and I could just see us going into, both of us could see us going in a trajectory of like, all right, what are we doing here? What are we building? Are we getting away from, do we really desire, like we weren't working together as much. You were sort of siloed off. You were starting to go on productions, without me, we were starting to, sort of split, on the team side of things from that standpoint. I was, more so managing people, and things. And then, Sam was still involved at that point, managing client things and the sales funnel and that side of that whole machine. And then, you were working more on the production side of stuff.
We were trying a lot of new stuff.
Yeah. And we were throwing, and we still have that mentality of like, let's throw it to the wall and see what sticks.
I think we tried some stuff and we're like, I don't think we like it. And I just don't like the feel of it. It doesn't feel on like DNA to us. And so, we were already kind of feeling like we need to make some changes. And that's kind of a lot of COVID kind of like pressed the issue on a lot of stuff, forced us to make some decisions we didn't want to make.
Accelerated things quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so, it even got to a point there too, where, I remember having the conversation with you again, this is early days COVID, but we thought it was very likely the end of the road, to some degree.
I think we just knew this is going to be a long build back again. Yeah, that's kind of where I was like, all right, like I feel like we're back at getting cut off, back at the knees. I almost felt like, and we're back to year one, and I'm like, man, year 1 to year 4 or 5 was like such a grind,
Yeah.
And now I'm like, now I'm in a different stage of life. I got 2 kids and they're older, and like the amount of time and energy and effort that I was able to put in, the first time around, I don't know if I have that to do it a whole nother round again. And so I think that, it was just kind of an eye-opening moment, you know, and you're just trying to figure out like, is production going to come back, And so
we weren't able to do anything in person really.
Nothing in person.
You were, but
not really, though.
Not really. People weren't comfortable with it, and no standards or protocols had been set up. And so, things pretty much scaled back to, it was just me and you, essentially.
Yeah. And it didn't make sense for us to have a lot of the stuff that we had. We trimmed
Right.
You know,
We went full remote.
Yeah.
Didn't have an office anymore. And thankfully, I mean, we were about to sign a 5-year lease. Like literally, I remember it dated in March 2020. And we were like, let's hold off and see this 14 days slowing the curve thing and see how this pans out. And then, you know, again, we'd already, before COVID, we knew like, all right, let's kind of scale down and get back to our roots here a bit and kind of get a little bit more nimble.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah, from a business standpoint.
I think the thing that I didn't factor in was, and this is good for anybody that is starting a production company, just to know, like, yeah, your first 5 years are going to be your toughest years. You're trying to make a name for yourself. You don't have a body of work yet. You know, like you're building your network. You know, like those are your toughest years. You're figuring out on the business side of things, like that, like just that upstart and just figuring that stuff out. You know, I can look back and I'm like, yeah, like that's tougher than where we're at now. Much tougher, you know, to figure that side of it out, you know, and like really truly like not have a whole lot to kind of work with, you know. And so, you know, fortunately at that time when I started out, like I had a fantastic person that was a main contact over at Steel. She was amazing and just continued just to give us opportunity after opportunity and trusted us, and like don't know where we would have been without her, like kind of believing in us and like encouraging us and giving us more opportunity. And then the next, you know, client, you know, same thing. Like we just continue just to kind of build our network and work with people that really kind of like believed in us and really liked to work with us. And so after you kind of build a rapport, then your name starts to get around, then you kind of work with new people, and then people either love you or hate you or are mediocre about you. Most people, I'd say 99.9% of the people love us. And so it's always fun to work with that type of stuff, those type of people. And so you're at that point in time, I think my mentality was like not factoring in any of that long-term, like just, you know, being successful by osmosis and just being around. There's something to be said for that. Like just sticking around, being around. And that's very beneficial for when you get into a tough time, like a COVID, you know, when you have been around for a long time. So anyway, hopefully that kind of makes sense. But, yeah, I mean, I think we were kind of looking at it like, well, that was a good run, but we got a long build back to go, to get back to where we were, you know.
Yeah.
And fortunately, it wasn't nearly as long as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Well,
so,
I mean, it goes back to our core values of, you know, just thinking about things creatively, having a positive outlook, and, you know, even on the pursuit of mastery side of things, like, all right, like we are going to get back to sharpening some iron here and just be ready to go for anything that comes our way. And again, it was slow in those beginning months of COVID, but we had gone back to those more nimble roots. But this time, like you said, you know, it's not like we're doing years 1 through 5 again, because we're 5 years further down the path, and we have all of that experience and wisdom from those first 5 years. And so we were able to bounce back, you know, and then some. And, you know, yeah, we made it through 2020. And, you know, by the end of 2020, it felt like sort of like everything that we had sort of missed out on. We were like, dude, we are like slammed busy. And then Q1, which is typically pretty slow for us, Q1 2021. We, you know, landed some pretty significant jobs, and that carried us through, you know, for the next 16 months. It was nonstop. At the beginning,
all night editing sessions, you know.
Yeah. And then, you know, during that time too, it was just me and you. We had, Haskell had reached out to us, and he was sort of new to the area, but had been working, up in Northern Virginia. And, he, you know, just came out. You know, we give anyone and everyone a shot, you know, and PA'd, and we just vibed well with him. And so we brought him, you know, along the journey with us. And, you know, he's been a core part of Flagship now for the last 2 years going on. And so it's been quite the last 2-3 years now. At this point, it's hard to believe. Yeah, COVID will be 3 years.
Yeah.
Like the anniversary of it will be in March.
Wild.
So
Like a couple weeks
yeah,
from
yeah,
the time of us recording this.
Yeah. So so that's crazy to think about.
We'll need to do a whole episode on just Matt.
Yeah.
like just Matt, the bull. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
A whole episode just on the Bulldog and the Boston Bulldog, and just deep dive into like some of those things. I think there's a lot to
I
talk
always
about.
talk about, in episodic terms, right? Like, so the Flagship has seasons. We're on like season 5 right now of Flagship. And so he was introduced in season 4 of Flagship. And we obviously have and love our OGs that were a part of season 1, 2, and 3. So it's just, but it's been a freaking journey, man. And
It's been fun, man.
yeah, it's been super, super fun. And we'll have to talk about, I think we've definitely brought us up to this chapter mark. But we'll have to talk about even, the last just 3 years of season 4 or 5 of Flagship, and the experiences that we've had, and, the productions that we've been on, and, the brands that we've worked with, and, even looking forward to the future and what Flagship, the next 5 years sort of looks like. But that's I don't know. Maybe this episode should be like how to survive and make it in the production industry, because that's kind of what it turned into. So hopefully there was some wisdom and some insight there. If nothing else, some good stories.
Some takeaways. Build your network. Massive key. Don't overextend yourself financially, and just understand that
Take risks.
Take risks, and the first couple years are going to be your hardest years getting in, and just know that. Just know if you're in, year 1 to 5, just know that's your toughest years.
Yeah, and take risks creatively, not financially.
Yeah.
Don't take out a loan,
or if you're going to take it risk financially, make sure it's very calculated.
Yeah, for sure. But again, every other Wednesday, we're going to be posting new episodes on YouTube and wherever else podcasts are found. So check out our LinkedIn and Instagram for more information on those episodes and where else to find us. We'll catch you on the next one.
On the next one.
On to the next one.